Hi everyone, welcome back to the 21 and Sensory podcast with me, Emily. On today's show, I have the wonderful special guest, Lucy Powrie. Lucy is a neurodivergent author whose dream is to fill bookshelves with as many books featuring proudly autistic and ADHD characters as possible, just like her. She makes bookish videos as Lucy the Reader on YouTube and has an audience of over 40,000 subscribers. She enjoys passionately sharing her love for old books, the Brontë sisters, and the BBC miniseries adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. Lucy is the author of 4 books for teens and young adults, the Paper and Heart Society series, and her latest publication, which is Real When I'm With You. In her spare time, she's also the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Brontë Society. When she's not writing or reading, she can be found cuddling her corgi, Margie, and looking after her herd of very cute guinea pigs. So, Lucy, would you like to say hello?
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. That all sounds very surreal. I'm like, is that really me? Like, oh, that's me. Hi. I am honestly such a big fan of the podcast. So it's like my dream to be here. A big bucket list author moment for me. So thank you so much for having me.
No worries. It's so lovely to hear that. I like that you've this has been like a bucket list moment. I think that's really I think that's probably the nicest thing anyone's ever said about the podcast is that it's a bucket list item. So thank you.
Yeah, it's what I always pop the podcast on when I'm like with the guinea pigs, like doing something I need to do, and I'm like there listening to you in the background with whoever you've got on, and I'm like, oh, it's great because I think, as an autistic person, which we'll talk about lots, I'm sure.
I think so, yeah.
I should think so. It's really lovely to be able to speak to someone who gets it, because I think the fear with doing anything like this is that I think often if I've done stuff with neurotypical people or people who maybe don't understand what it's like to be autistic, there's a moment where I speak where I always feel like I'm going to be misunderstood or misread, or I won't recognise myself when I hear it back or read something back, because that autistic voice doesn't quite translate in the same way as I think it does to other autistic people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the joy of being able to do something like this, and the joy of what you do for even what you give everybody. So that's really lovely for me.
Oh, that's really nice. So we usually start the podcast with discussing a little bit more about you and your background and the process and journey behind your own diagnosis. I know that you're autistic and you were diagnosed with ADHD, is that right?
Yep, that's right.
So if you could give us a little bit of a background as to kind of when and where and just kind of how you came to understand this about yourself. And then I think we will, of course, talk about books and autism and masking as well. I'd like to chat to you about. So yeah, when did you find this out about yourself?
So I think there was always a part of me, I think, growing up that felt very different. I think I couldn't explain why. I couldn't explain what it was, but I always knew there was something about me that didn't quite fit in with everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been through the child and mental health services as a 9 or 10-year-old, because I'd had quite severe phobias that nobody could explain, quite bad anxiety, and nobody could quite tell what was going on with me. But looking back, it was very obvious that I was just autistic. But maybe, times I think have changed even since. I think it's still much more difficult for autism to be recognised in girls, but then it didn't even really seem to be a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And then I struggled a lot at school, found that incredibly difficult. And then it wasn't until I'd sort of left school and I'd started, I don't know, I maybe stumbled across someone talking about their own autistic experiences one day, that I sort of looked at it and I was like, oh, that's me. I suddenly thought, I might be autistic. And I'd sort of put off the process of diagnosis until it got to a point where not having a diagnosis was affecting how I worked, how I understood myself. And And so I got my diagnosis in 2021, I believe, which seems like a really long time ago now. But because I think the journey after my diagnosis was just, as intense as I think the time before. So it's still a process, I think. And as I was filling out the forms and talking about my experience more in the run up to my diagnosis, one day was looking at something about autism and ADHD, and I was reading the ADHD page and looked at it and I was like, but this can't be ADHD because this sounds exactly like me. And then had this big crisis moment of like, oh no, this really does sound like me as well. And I'm also dyspraxic, which means that as I'm sat here recording this, I'm very conscious of the glass of water next to me because I'm very aware of the fact that I'm autistic. It affects everything in my brain, everything about the way I live my life. And my ADHD, it's also the way I sort of interact with things. But my dyspraxia tends to hit out of nowhere and I tend to forget about it until I do something. So yeah, I'm autistic, ADHD and dyspraxic. That was a long answer. This is how you know I've got ADHD, because
No.
I'll just keep talking.
That is ideal for a podcast. That's all good. So did you know kind of you were dyspraxic from a young age, or do you think you were just kind of labelled as sort of clumsy? Because I feel like a lot of people get that kind of label quite early on.
I think so. I mean, I didn't know. I think there was just this general idea, maybe discussed, that I think people sort of picked up on things maybe as individual traits, but there wasn't necessarily a bigger picture of a diagnosis or even a word for it. So my handwriting, for example, was always really bad, and my teacher, I remember, would suggest, like, maybe you should write with your other hand because clearly you can't write with this one.
Wow.
I remember doing this like primary school test where some older kids were trying to work out which hand people wrote with, and I was the only one that they couldn't figure out which hand I wrote with based on the test that they did, because I always try to say, well, I'm not right-handed, I'm not left-handed, I'm actually neither-handed, because I'm not sure either does what it should do. But so there were all of these signs. I would be the kid in the playground that would just get hit by a passing ball because I had no sort of awareness of anything around me. So, and I think that was the case with so many things, is that those individual traits would be picked up on, but there was never a sense of this is what it means. Because I was a toe walker, for example. As soon as I started walking, I would walk on my toes and everybody would comment on it. I saw a pediatrician. I've got doctor's notes that I took along when I got my autism diagnosis. And I think one of the hardest things about the diagnosis process was having to look back at my whole life and see so many of the missed opportunities, when it seemed so obvious to me when I put everything together that there was a very clear answer for what I was experiencing.
It's tricky, isn't it? It sounds like no one kind of mentioned, oh, you might be autistic. It sounds like you found all this out about yourself through like self-research.
Which I think is quite an autistic thing to do, really.
Absolutely.
I think if you don't have somebody else who does notice it, then actually the autistic brain is very, usually very good at researching. And so but I think, after the diagnosis, I really do think that's when I sort of, I struggled the most, because it was, looking back on everything, and I think feeling so many emotions, feeling, sort of a resentment towards, medical professionals, for example, who had missed it, school teachers maybe. And, my parents said all along I was their only child, that I was just their child. They didn't know that I was any different to any other child. But I think, we all had to go on a journey after, and I think it's really difficult to look back on your whole life, really, and evaluate it through the lens of, oh, actually I was autistic, and that sort of explains, why I was the way I was, why people treated me this way, or, why I felt, something about a certain situation. So yeah, it was difficult. Often brain achingly difficult, but worth it.
because like you just said, you're reliving your life through that lens. You're like, oh, so that's why this could have, been quite difficult for me. Or like, I don't know how you found like the kind of like education system. Like, I don't, how old were you when you were diagnosed? Like, was this before university?
No, so I was actually late going to university. I didn't go to university either. I did an online degree.
Oh, okay.
So I was about a year into it. I was 21 when I got my diagnosis.
Right.
But even recently, I was going to do something where I was going to have to talk about my school experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time we're filming this, it's that sort of back to school time, and I have really struggled this year, I think, with that sort of back to school feeling, even though I'm not at school myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's so much trauma attached to it still that it doesn't affect my whole life anymore as it once did. But my experiences at school really impacted me, I think. Even simple things like the sensory experience of putting on a uniform or listening to the bell go every day, up to things like, friendships and bullying and, that level. So, the tiny things and then these very big things, everything has such an impact that I, came to this opportunity recently and I was like, I just can't do this. I don't think I am at a point where I can talk about my experiences at school, just sat on my own. It felt quite raw and revealing in a way that, talking like this feels like a very safe space. But I felt like if I was sat on my own, just having to recount school, it felt too much like going into myself, to a place where I try not to go.
Yeah, and also depending on who you're talking to as well, like there's a lot of people that won't understand the sensory hell that is a school environment. Like, how do you get that across in words? Like, every day having to exist in this environment. So, yeah, I can definitely get why you'd be, worried to do something like that.
I think as well at the time I didn't realise it. So one of the things I kind of realised was that on non-school uniform days, I would feel just slightly better than every morning when I had to put on my blazer and my school skirt. And I never realised that actually just putting on the uniform was a sensory hell, but also sort of signified something greater in my brain, almost like that was when I put on my mask, maybe, was the uniform. So it's, things like that you don't even think at the time, I think, because you're so deep in it. But it wasn't a fun time to look back on, but I got through it. It's gone now, it's over. Which it's always a relief.
And this might sound a little bit cheesy, but did writing was that like a form of escapism for you? Like, I know you started writing your first series of books when you were still in school, is that right?
Yeah, so I started writing my first book, The Paper and Heart Society, when I was doing my GCSEs, which I wouldn't recommend to anyone. But actually I kind of would, because I don't think I was necessarily stressed about my exams. I think, I was always quite good in that sort of situation, but except I would never revise because of my ADHD. I just couldn't do it. I've never been able to revise for anything. So I just distracted myself instead by, starting to write a book, reading like the entire the first like Outlander book, which is 800 pages or something. And I think that's how, because that's just how my brain works. And to anyone else, I think it just sounds like, why are you doing that? But I even now when I'm doing stuff, my brain likes to sort of multitask. I think the busier I am, the more I get done. It's times when everything is quiet and I haven't got a lot on, that's when I tend to do nothing at all. And it was an escape. And I think so the idea for my first book really came from wanting to write a group of friends, because I had sort of lost all of my friends. I was very isolated from the group I'd sort of grown up with through secondary school. And I thought, well, I haven't got any friends in real life, so I'm just going to write myself some fictional ones instead, which I always think is kind of the sob story behind the book. But it wasn't, because it led to, so many amazing things.
Yeah.
But it was an escape. And I think writing continues to be. I think one of the things now, though, with my books is I don't tend to write school settings anymore. Because I don't want to spend extended time thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, my latest book is set during the summer holidays, which is perfectly fine with me. It's very intentional. So I think all my books now really will be sort of perpetual summers.
That sounds good. I guess that's the thing as well, is you can choose, you can pick, when and where they're set, and the characters as well. And I love, let's focus now on book chat. I love how you've got like a neurodivergent main character, but also like that secondary cast of neurodivergent people as well. I think it's really amazing to see. Maybe could you give us a kind of synopsis of Real When I'm With You? That might be a good way to start, just so people have a rough idea what it's about.
Yeah, so Real When I'm With You is my first YA book, so for older teenagers, and it's about Effie, who is autistic. She's a cat-loving autistic people pleaser, is how I describe her. Her special interest is cats. She wears lots of cat clothing, cat earrings, cat faces on her jeans. She's got a cat called Lady Mousington. She's also an artist. And she has very much felt for a long time that she's in her best friend Chelsea's shadow. Chelsea seems to have a new boyfriend every month, and as soon as she gets a new boyfriend, Effie's sort of pushed to the side and forgotten about, or she has to third wheel. And the book starts at the beginning of summer as Chelsea has a new boyfriend, and Effie sat in the local coffee shop, Love You a Latte, watching as Chelsea and her new boyfriend Paul sort of snog each other's faces off in the corner, and she's stuck there watching. And then Effie meets the barista there, Aidan. They have a sort of, they meet, but then they have another meet cute on the beach where she accidentally falls in the sea, which again is a sensory disaster. And I think when she meets Aidan, she realizes that actually there might be a different, way instead, and they sort of get on. And they sort of click in a way I think you do with other neurodivergent people.
Mm-hmm.
And so one day, Effie's best friend Chelsea tells her, you're never going to get a boyfriend. You're just jealous of me. And Effie decides to prove her wrong and marches up to the counter and Love You a Latte and asks Aidan out on a fake date.
Mm-hmm.
So Effie and Aidan have this summer of fake dating, and Aidan reveals to her that he has ADHD, but he also has a group of friends who are neurodivergent. So there's Gigi, who is autistic, one of my favourite characters to write, and Tess, who has dyslexia. And I think for me it was so important to have that group. I think because traditionally, I think, sometimes approaches to neurodiversity in books have been to have one character.
Mm-hmm.
But actually I find that most of my friends, intentional or not, end up being neurodivergent, because those are the people that I sort of click with most. And
Mm-hmm.
I think for a lot of us, it's nice to have friends who get it. Often without you having to tell them, they just sort of understand it. And so writing that was really, really special for me, and just so much fun to see how their neurodivergent traits and experiences sort of complemented each other.
Oh, so it's so interesting to hear. Like, and in terms of like the characters, is this something that you kind of had in your mind as an idea for a book, or is this kind of how do you like craft characters? And I just find it all really fascinating.
Yeah, so I'd started writing it a few months after my diagnosis, and I knew that I wanted to write autistic characters. I knew I wanted to write autistic stories. And I think the idea from this one really came from having read a lot of romance. I wanted to take these sort of classic romance tropes and
Mm-hmm.
make them autistic or neurodivergent in some way. I wanted to know what it would be like, for example, for a character to fake date, but they're autistic, and it's kind of, a lot of us have quite a strong sense of of judgment, a sense of what's right and wrong. But if you're fake dating, how does that interact with that? You know, the lying and, you know, the deceit. So I wanted to, you know, put a neurodivergent spin on these tropes and see how that would, you know, would affect the story. And Effie and Aidan really just sort of walked off the page. I like to think that I kind of walked into Love You a Latte one day, sat down, and they were just there and sort of told me, like, can you tell our story? Because I don't actually have an answer to where they came from. They literally just walked onto the page, and the first chapter of the book hardly changed at all. I worked on it for a really long time, but fundamentally nothing about it changed. You know, it was always this scene, you know, the scene that's in the book now. So I kind of made it better, but I didn't change anything about it. So yeah, they were always there, and I think, you know, they always had a life of their own, and they kind of told me what they wanted me to do with the story.
That's cool. That's such an interesting way of looking at it as well, is that they came to you, not like the other way around. You know, you sound like you're so ingrained in their story. I think that's so interesting. And what you were saying about kind of the romance sort of genre as well, I think autistic romance generally, it shouldn't be such a wild concept to, you know, to be talked about, to be written about. Like, for example, like having read your book and Elle McNichol's Some Like It Cold, like it's so amazing to see like autistic romance being covered, and just how like tricky it is to navigate relationships as a neurodivergent person.
You know, I agree completely. I think one of the things I was sort of worried about was that I think in romance in particular, people they get quite upset, for example, about the miscommunication trope. You know, about characters not communicating effectively with each other. And I kind of have an issue with that, because I understand that some tropes aren't for some people, but I think in general, approaching the idea of communication as an autistic person, you know, there are so many different layers to communicating between you know, an autistic person, or an autistic person and a neurotypical person. You know, so you know, things like that for me, I think, you know, are always going to be interesting. There are interesting angles to tackle, and I always worry, you know, too, that I'll write something and you know, somebody say, well, you know, the main characters are unlikable. You know, and I feel quite fiercely protective over these, you know, my neurodivergent children characters. You know, I feel very protective over writing characters, and I feel very protective over the audience who I'm writing for as well. And I'm happy that there are, you know, more of us writing now. And I think my hope is, you know, I'm always writing for, you know, autistic readership, but I hope that it extends further as well, and people realize actually the story is for, you know, for everyone as well. You know, the third book in my Paper and Heart series, the love interest is autistic. And when I was talking about that book, the words I used were that who a love interest is tells you so much about who we think deserves to be loved. And I think that was just as important for me as, you know, who is the love interest of this book. And I think, you know, I don't ever want to write that sort of pitying romance where it's like, oh, you know, the character is autistic and somebody's taken pity on her and loved her, because I wouldn't want that in my own life. No. And I think sometimes maybe that's traditionally how people have thought about autistic love, is, oh, she's autistic, but there's somebody who loves her. When actually it should be, she's autistic and, you know, she's very loved because she's autistic. You know, it's part of you. It's not something you can sort of take away or turn on and off. It's there. It's who you are fundamentally.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also the way that the book, I mean, it's in the title, like being real when I'm with you, like the fact that you cover so much about kind of masking and who you are with certain people. I think like that's really important, because I feel like a lot of people don't realize that we have to be these different peoples, or we have to put on a front in order to exist in a world that's really not made for us. So of course in a relationship, like, that's going to be hard to keep up that kind of mask. So I think, yeah, it's great that you've been able to get the kind of masking side of things in as well. And yeah, I just kind of wish it was a book that I'd had when I was growing up.
I think I feel the same, and I think I very much write for my younger self. And I think in the moments of doubt, that come along the way with the writing process, that's what I always come back to, is that this is the book I would have needed. And if I needed it, then there will still be girls, there'll still be autistic people who need this, who need something like this. And I think the more of us who are writing this type of book, the more we're sort of telling the industry and the world that, we deserve to take up space too. And I think, a lot of the book is about taking up space and using your voice, and I think not necessarily being the loudest in the room, but speaking up when you have something to say, in a way that's authentic for you. And to me, early on, before I'd signed, some of the feedback with the book was that it was quite a quiet book, and I think that made me quite angry in a way, because it wasn't an intentional comment. But I think maybe there is a tendency to see books with autistic main characters as quiet books, when actually they're incredibly loud for the people that they mean a lot to.
Yeah, massively. That's wow.
So yeah, it was a process. I think me learning to speak through the book as well. I think I had to unmask a lot when writing it, almost.
Yeah, I was wondering. I was going to ask you, like, what is your own kind of experience of masking like, and has writing this book changed that for you at all?
It's a really difficult question, because often I don't realise I've been masking until it sort of hits me.
Yeah.
And I get burnt out. I start to feel like, I suddenly feel like I can't maintain the mask, and then I'm like, oh well, I must have been masking then.
Yeah.
And I think I think a lot about masking, because I never want to do it, but I've also been in situations, maybe like romantic situations, if I've been dating or whatever, where I felt so out of my depth or unsafe that I've taken the mask off completely, and then I don't feel authentic to me. And so I always feel like there's a careful balance. I think the unmasking journey's been one of the most interesting to me since my diagnosis, because so much of the unmasking journey is also about figuring out who you are now that you are autistic, now that you know that you're autistic. And so for me, it wasn't, I suppose nowadays I don't think of it so much as a masking, but about how do I live my most authentic autistic life in a way that is healthy for me as an autistic person. And masking and unmasking is a part of that, but it's part of a much bigger picture, because I think sometimes if I think too much about masking, that also becomes a way of masking.
You slip into it, kind of thing, without knowing. Yeah.
If I think about it too hard, I'll start masking. I suppose when I think about it, masking for me kind of feels like I'm in my own reality TV series and I'm being watched and observed.
Okay.
So I kind of like live out this, I feel like I'm living for something, and I'm living in a way that does feel kind of observed, or very a careful way of being, like I'm monitoring myself almost. And I realize that I'm masking because I'll do it even when I'm on my own. So when I'm heavily masking, even when nobody's around, I'll still feel like I've got to keep the mask up.
Okay.
And I don't know if I've necessarily heard people talk about it in that way, but I don't know if it feels like a mask necessarily, but I am masking, I suppose, You know, it's like a full facade around my whole sense of being, maybe, is probably a better way of describing it. But also it's just such a personal thing that trying to sort of describe the concept of masking what it feels like, I never quite feel like I get there personally, which I think is why I enjoy exploring it in my writing. Because I think it's very different for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And I do wonder as well, like I was going to ask you, like, do you have like a kind of running kind of autistic inner monologue at all that's kind of, because I have that kind of like built in and it's trying to help me and it doesn't. But I just wonder if that's something that you're dealing with as well, where, you know, your brain's always trying to help you in situations, but actually it's probably not.
Yeah, I don't know. This is one of the areas where I'm not sure how my autism and my ADHD are interacting with each other, because my ADHD inner monologue can be very frantic, and like recently, you know, it's just been playing music constantly all day and all night. Just songs constantly. My brain is singing all the time. And then I'm trying to like think up book ideas, and then I get like excited about something, and then I'll wake up the next day and be like, no, it's rubbish, move on to the next one. So there's like 20 million things always happening in my brain. And so, you know, I think it becomes very difficult to untangle sometimes what's going on in there. So yeah, I'm actually not sure. You know, I try to understand my brain, and I think I do understand the processes a lot more now. I know I was always very difficult as a kid, you know, especially as a kid having meltdowns. I would never recognize the signs, for example. Whereas now I'm very good at, you know, thinking, oh, actually I'm experiencing sensory overload here. Maybe you should take off your coat. Or, you know, it's like you are wearing like 5 different layers and you are sweating. I think, you know, like my brain doesn't process senses the same, and so it's like my brain will be screaming at me in some way, singing, and then there's also the part of my brain that is like, yeah, so there's a really strong smell, and there's like this noise is happening over there, and somebody's just walked past, and I'm also trying to have a conversation, and then, you know, it's like all these different layers, I think, is probably how my brain works. There's so many different layers to what my brain is processing at any one time.
I almost wish there was like a visual way that people could see the sheer amount of processes we're going through. like it's a lot to manage, but also it is really draining to have a brain that is constantly like switched on to that extent, or, you know, giving you unhelpful songs all the time. Like it's that noise is constant.
Yeah. But also it's, I was just trying, when you were saying that, I was just trying to think about it. I don't think you can, you know, explain it visually, and I also don't think you can explain it in an auditory way, because it is the bombardment of all the senses. So it, you know, it's a constant onslaught, a constant bombardment of everything sort of being chucked at you. And then you've somehow got to filter out what's useful to you, but then you can't filter out what's not useful. It's still there. And so, you know, I think I don't know any different. I've always been like this, but I would never change it. But I feel like maybe people I interact with, even on a daily basis, or people I know maybe who aren't autistic, don't realize that that's constantly going on. And I tend, because I'm so used to it, because I don't know any different, sometimes I don't even realize it's going on until I start to think about it, and I think, oh yeah, you know, this is overwhelming. Life is overwhelming.
But yeah, it is very interesting, like you saying how it is really hard to untangle between the kind of autism and ADHD, and I definitely think that's the case as well in terms of like mental health as well. You're like, what is, you know, is this a kind of, you know, autistic sensory kind of thought, or is this ADHD, or is this more anxiety or depression? Like it is so you kind of can't unpick it, but it's really hard not to want to solve it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, because I think our brains are almost designed, or I feel like sometimes mine is, and I think, you know, I've heard other autistic people say this, our brains like to solve things.
Yes.
If you've got a problem, you like to sort of break it down, and you want to put it, you know, into separate parts, and, you know, compartmentalize it in some way. But sometimes you can't do that with things, or sometimes it's, you know, the sensory, the sensory experience might be too overwhelming to, you know, unpick, but still your brain wants to do it. And, you know, I sometimes it's easier than others, and I feel like that's even, you know, you mentioning about mental health, that's sort of I think outside of that again. It's like, well, this is happening, and, you know, I think I find, for example, the process of publishing quite difficult for my mental health, because there's a lot going on, you know, very busy, and I'm having to think a lot about, you know, being autistic, for example, in a way that, you know, and having to communicate that in a different way than I usually would have to in my everyday life. And so recently I've, you know, I suppose I have been thinking more about, you know, so I know that I'm autistic. I know how my autistic brain works. I know, you know, I'm ADHD. I know how that works. But then at the moment, maybe I do feel, you know, slightly more burnt out, because I've, you know, been doing this publication process. And then because I feel more burnt out, that's affecting my mental health maybe more. And it's not that it's necessarily fully negative, but I'm still having to contend a bit more with my mental health. And so then that's another thing to think about. And I think it's very difficult to describe the relationship with your mental health as a neurodivergent person. I find it quite difficult, because I think a lot of people think that being neurodivergent is a mental health condition. I think that's still a very commonly held belief. And I think, you know, there's lots of crossover, but you could be neurodivergent, you know, be autistic, be ADHD, and have perfectly wonderful mental health, but, you know, you could also have the opposite. And so it, you know, that again, it's one of those things that's so tangled up, that trying to think about, you know, actually I feel really down today, or I feel really anxious today, is it because something's happening in my life that's making me feel anxious? Is it because I'm just autistic and I'm anxious? You know, that again, it's just a lot. It's a lot of brain admin.
Yeah, you have to be your like own detective, don't you? Like,
Yeah,
it feels like you're constantly like, is this or this? When actually, I think we're never really going to be able to get right down to it, and just having to guess at it probably doesn't help. I don't know.
no, because then that makes your brain ache even more.
Well, yeah, there's that as well.
Even more processing.
Yeah. And you kind of mentioning that you were burnt out, especially with the whole kind of publishing and deadlines and things. Am I right in saying you were also writing your dissertation at the same time?
Yes.
Lucy, is this a good idea?
No, so this is the thing as well. So, you know, I think talking, I'd like to start, I think, more of a conversation around mental health, I think, in, you know, publishing, because I think it's one of those things people maybe don't talk about, because you're supposed to feel really grateful for the experience. And I really love publishing, and I really love writing, and I love everything about it. And so the effect that it has, you know, is slightly more negligible, because I enjoy it. But I am autistic, and I'm experiencing this all, and it feels, you know, sometimes can feel quite overwhelmingly neurotypical, even though that's probably not true. But it can feel like the industry as a whole is designed best for, well, maybe not for anyone, but really for neurotypical people. And so I got to publication, and you think, oh God, like, wow, I made it, and I did it, and this is great. And then I was like, why am I so burnt out? Like, why do I, you know, just suddenly feel like I've like run 50,000 mental marathons? And I was like, oh yeah, because I also did a dissertation this year. So I was doing my final year of my history degree at the exact same time I went through the whole publishing process with this book.
Wow.
Which was mad, and I knew it was going to be. But now I think the problem is I haven't got that, and so I'm not quite as busy. So now I'm like, well, I've got all this time. I just, my ADHD brain wants to leave things to the last minute. And so sometimes having more on does help, even though it's stressful. This time I didn't get particularly stressed, and everyone around me was like, "You're not stressed about this. Why aren't you stressed?" And I think I just went into this. I think this was the first book I've published with a diagnosis, and that really helped. That helped hugely, more because I actually can vocalize now what's going on, and I can understand it a lot more in myself, and I can do what works best. But it's never going to be, I think it's always going to be something extra to have to think about, is it sensible for me to, do this thing, because that means then I won't be able to write, or, it's sort of contending with your time and, protecting your mental health in the process. So, yeah, it was silly on my my part the last year, but it was worth it. So
And I guess also, like, there's publication day, and then I kind of feel like people think like that's it, but actually there's a whole lot of marketing and like PR and the potential that you might be asked to speak at like different events. Or I know you did like an in conversation evening with Elle in like Waterstones. Like how does that affect like your mental health as well? Because it doesn't just stop once it's published. Like you've got to keep promoting the book, obviously. Like you want people to read it. Like is that what's the good and the bad bits of being an author, basically?
Yeah, so it's there is a lot involved. I think that people don't see. I think specifically thinking about the way that publishing affects me as a neurodivergent person, I think is quite similar to many other jobs, in that I love the writing, especially when I can get into it and I can get really hyper focused and really into the characters. And I loved the editing process on this one. I loved working with my editors, and I loved becoming a better author because of the people that I'd worked with, and the way that I could really sort of hone my craft, I think, more with this. But then there's like the emails coming in. Like, I'm completely hyper focused at the moment. I need to finish this chapter because it's all I can think about, and I haven't eaten, I haven't drunk anything for like 4 hours at this point because I'm so into this world. What is the real world? And then your email inbox is going off and people want things from you. So I think the
How
biggest
dare they?
I know, it's so rude. I think it's the demands, and I think something I've been thinking about a lot recently is, I think when I talk about demands on you as a neurodivergent person, I'm not talking about someone saying, do this for me. The way that I see it is like almost like like an inbox, for example, or like a tray, and somebody's suddenly loading loads and loads of papers on it, and then now telling me like, you've got to work through all of them, and my brain sees all of it. It doesn't see individual tasks. So I can only see this massive, overwhelming load of stuff that's taking me away from like my special interests, or taking me away from like the things I want to do. And emails for me are so difficult because it's one of the things I struggle with, I think, most, because I have to, there's so many parts to it. It's not just sitting down and writing something. It's like, what does my tone sound like? What's the convention? What is someone actually asking of me here? Do I need to do anything for this? So it's all those things. And then, for example, I don't know if you get this with the podcast or across social media, but I know from like filming videos, for example, I'd taken a step away from my YouTube channel for a while, particularly after my diagnosis, because I couldn't figure out how much of me was masking when I was creating.
That's interesting.
So there might be some days when I wake up and I think, well, this is on my to-do list to do today, but I physically cannot sit in front of a camera and talk about anything today. I have to be in the right frame of mind. Because otherwise words I can't process what I'm going to say. So I never write notes, for example. I'm very much sort of ad-libbing. And so if my brain won't process it just won't process.
Yeah.
So, those sorts of things I think are more difficult, the promotional side. And then for a lot of authors as well, we'll do school visits. Well, school visits for an
Whoa.
autistic author, it's like, putting you in the scene of the trauma. And school librarians are great, and I've loved the school visits I've done. But for my first book, doing school visits, I would often get home and I would just cry, or I'd have a meltdown, or I'd be completely burnt out for like a week afterwards. And so it's like I'd love to do those things, but I'm still trying to figure out how I do those things, and don't reach burnout, don't have a meltdown, don't cry my eyes out because it's so awful. So all those things are extra things to think about.
The cost of it to you afterwards is so great, like weighing up whether or not to do these things, because the recovery time is going to be quite significant. Like, that must be quite hard to know. You kind of know what's coming, but I don't know if you're like me and you kind of forget what a meltdown feels like. You're like, oh no, I'll be fine after this event, it'll be fine. You're just not fine. Like, I never learn.
Yeah, and I think it is that learning, because I think this way about writing books as well is that I forget how terrible I find writing until I'm back doing it, and I'm like, I hate every part of the thing that I'm currently doing, but I look back on it so fondly and with such a high afterwards.
Okay.
So, I think it is the cost and having to weigh up that cost. And also, it's so difficult to talk about it without feeling like, I'm sound ungrateful, or I sound miserable, or I sound like I hate this, because I genuinely love what I do. And I'm so, happy that I get to write books like this. And it means so much to me. But also, there's just an awful lot. Well, there's just always so much going on in my brain, I think, is probably the takeaway from this whole podcast.
Mm-hmm.
The author Lucy Powrie has an extremely busy brain and it never shuts up. So yeah, it's always the processing, the demands, there's just a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
A lot to think about.
So actually, it's amazing you've written 4 books and a dissertation with, that constant noise and just the constant filtering of thoughts as well. I think you've done amazing. And the fact that you were writing, even like during your GCSEs, like, it shows how much you love it. Like, the fact that, yes, it was exam season, etc., but that you needed to keep at it, and that was kind of a way of escaping the hell that is school. I think you can just tell, even just through your voice, how passionate you are about writing and how much it's just integral to you.
Yeah, I don't know if you probably feel the same, but I'm so driven by passion, and I think this is, when I think I would always say to people, like, I would never ever change the fact that I'm autistic. There is no part of me that would ever not want to be autistic, because I feel like that's where I get my passion from. And like a passion that just feels so joyful and so pure, like the purest autistic joy. Like a brief moment of that makes all of the sensory hell, or the social anxieties or whatever, worth it to me. And passion, I think, is the thing that sort of drives me, that like love of something. And and I love writing, even on the days where I hate it and think, why do I do this? Usually because I have ADHD and procrastinate too much. But I wouldn't change it, and I'm so grateful for everything that it's given me, like the people I have met, because I love reading, and because I have written these books, and the people who contact me and say, like, I see myself in what you've done. I remember being that little kid, like, writing to authors, being like, I love your book so much. And now people do the same, and you think, like, oh, this is why I do it. It's the passion. And I think that's what I'd say to any writer, is like, write about what you're passionate about, because it makes it so much easier. If you love your subject, you can just let your imagination run wild from there.
Ooh, bit of free advice there as well. That leads quite well on to, I was going to ask you, obviously when you're not reading or writing, which sounds like I would say 99% of the time is what you're doing, but kind of hobbies, special interests. I know obviously in the introduction I mentioned about the many things you do in terms of like the being on Board of Trustees of the Brontë Society and things like that. Like, is that kind of a special interest?
Yeah, so the Brontes are definitely a special interest. I do think that Emily Bronte, and actually I would say Charlotte Bronte as well, were probably autistic. I don't think we can ever prove it, but they are my autistic special interest, and I see a lot of myself in their writing. And I think, because of YouTube videos I had done, work I'd done with the Brontë Society, I then, got the opportunity to join the Board of Trustees as a trustee, and I now, lead the board as chair, which is that absolute dream come true. We've just acquired new property and got some really exciting developments happening, which is incredible to be part of, a small part of Bronte history. But in terms of other hobbies, I think maybe one that doesn't come through as much is I'm very into birds.
Are you?
I'm an autistic bird watcher.
Amazing.
I know like all the little bird facts. I, go out with my binoculars. So, I'm a birder, I think is probably maybe the most surprising one.
I did not know this.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's one of those ones where it's like, I think it's perfect because I'll be like, stood somewhere and someone will be having a conversation with me, and I'll just like, did you hear that kingfisher go by? Did you hear that? Because I could, and so I've got really bad eyesight, really. Well, not bad, but, I don't necessarily process, what's in front of me a lot of the time. But I've got a really good way of processing birds in the landscape, which I think is like, I'm not sure how I feel about people, calling autism a superpower, but I do feel like that's an autistic, like a side of, my autistic processing gives me this power to spot birds.
Well, the fact that you can, filter through everything to hear that, but I get what you're saying. Like, you have an ear for it.
Yeah, definitely, and like an eye for it as well. Of like the that the sensory experience. It's like a positive sensory experience, which is always nice, because in general I feel like a lot of my sensory experiences are quite negative. I sometimes wish I could switch them off.
Why isn't that a thing?
I don't know, but it should be.
Honestly, we'd save a lot on like noise cancelling headphones and things if we could just, switch off certain things. But yeah, I it's interesting, really interesting that you're a bird watcher, I think. And also I love it when people can info dump on a special interest. So if someone's out on a walk with you, like, you'd be a fascinating person to go on a walk with.
Or really irritating. Depending on how interested you are, because I can go on for a really long time. So it's like books, the Brontes, and birds. I've got special interests all with the letter B.
And also, I read that you actually reached out to the Brontë Society, is that right?
Yeah, I think, well, so again, I think this is probably my brazen autistic teenaged brain was like, I've been talking about the Brontes on YouTube. I read an article that the Brontë Parsonage Museum had done in one of the newspapers where they were like, we want to reach young people. And I thought, I've got an audience of young people. I'm just going to find an email. Send an email, like, would you like to work with me? And I was 17 then, did a year as their young ambassador in 2018, which was incredible. And it's been such a meaningful relationship for so many years for me, that to now be on the other side and get to like hear about the acquisitions before anybody knows them, or get to help to shape an organization, knowing how much it's given me. I think being able to give back is so special to me.
It's amazing that you've like grown with it as well. Like you say, you kind of started by just almost, cold calling and hoping that they'd, get back to you. But the fact that you're now the chair is, yeah, that must be wild to think, 17-year-old you to now.
Sometimes I think to myself, like, why do you feel, so tired of all of this? And I think I've been doing this for a really long time. And I'm only 25 and I've been like blogging since I was 12. I've been doing this for 13 years, like this job.
Wow.
For 13 years.
That's a full-time job to be having. Like, yeah, geez.
So I think, yeah, I'm reaching retirement age soon. Yeah, so it's been a long journey, and I'm only young.
Still young. And one last thing that I wanted to talk to you about, even if it's briefly, is can we chat about your guinea pigs and your dog?
We can.
Excellent.
I would love to.
Tell me everything.
So I'm such like an animal loving autistic, and I think a lot of my book characters are as well, because I just love writing fictional animals as well. So yeah, I've actually got 3 dogs, 2 family dogs: a 17-year-old Jack Russell, Daisy, who is a medical miracle at this point. Digby, 17
is amazing. Wow.
Yeah, her birthday was very special a few weeks ago. Digby I've got as well. He's a 6-year-old Cocker Spaniel who definitely has ADHD. He is quite a good, accurate representation of my brain. And then I have my own corgi, Margie, who is just like her mother. She is also very autistic. She, sensory issues. She doesn't like interacting with people.
Totally fair.
She loves me and I love her. But she hasn't been very well, so that's been very stressful as well. So, and then I also have lots and lots of guinea pigs. I don't have as many now.
Okay.
But I have.
How many do you have?
I have 20 now.
Oh my word!
But I have bred them, as a hobby since I was 7 years old.
Okay.
And I can trace my current guinea pigs back like 15 generations to the original guinea pigs I had as a 7-year-old. So
wow,
that's again, like, when I look at them, that's like my entire life in in guinea pigs. But they're very cute. I love them. I love having little babies. They are very, I just love looking after them. And you just like watching them and observing them and everything about them. Yeah, I'm definitely an animal loving autistic. I prefer animals to people.
Oh, 100%. I love how like they communicate in their like little like happy squeaks as well, guinea pigs. I feel like they're just, I don't know, they're just existing and they're just happy to be pootling around.
I think they are so happy, and like mine are really friendly, and they have a little stand that they stand on, and I go out in the morning and they're waiting for their breakfast, looking at me like, come feed us. So yeah, they're very special and very chatty, very sociable animals. And yeah, I love them.
Also, if you want to see any pictures of little baby guinea pigs, I'm pretty sure I've seen some on your Instagram. I mean, of course, where you've got to upload little tiny guinea pig pictures. I think I've seen them on there.
Yeah, and when this podcast goes live, I'll post them, especially when I tell everybody about the podcast. Now that we've spoken about them, I'll get them to listen to the podcast. I think they'll enjoy listening to it.
Oh my god! I'll be like, my listeners include some little guinea pigs. I mean,
it's the 21 and Sensory exclusive guinea pig podcast viewing.
Yeah. Oh my god, that'd be amazing. It sounds like, yeah, the whole kind of, being an autistic person who like loves animals. I love it when people come on, they're like, my dog is my best friend. Like you don't have to communicate through words to love something. And I feel like that's especially true with animals. They they can kind of sense when you're a little bit down in the dumps. But I just think animals are so important. They keep you going. They're always excited to see you. Like, why aren't people like that?
Well, yeah, I think so my corgi hasn't been very well, and I think one of the hardest things has been like the change in routine of I think animals give you that sense of routine of like, I've got to get up, I've got to walk them, I've got to look after them, I've got to and I think one of the hardest things for me was actually going like, my routine has changed through this, and she's my best friend, like the love of my life, like and I think since I've had my own dog, she is one of the best. If I very rarely have meltdowns these days because I know the signs so much better, I know myself better and what triggers them, but if she is my like my support, she just is so attuned to what I need better than any human, better than anybody. She knows, which is not intentional. That's just the relationship, I suppose, that we have. That was a surprise to me, but that I think in anything, I think the most awful thing I experience as an autistic person usually is meltdowns. And so whenever somebody or something, an animal or person, can support that in a way I need, that's always the thing. That's like my autistic love language, I think, is feeling supported as an autistic person. And I think animals are great at that, for the routine, for the structure that they give you, and for this like unconditional love that they give you.
100%. Definitely.
I love them.
And also they know when it's breakfast and dinner time, and they'll let you know that it's, even if it's half an hour early, they'll give it a go. Like, in terms of routine, they really do make you kind of stop what you're doing and go and feed them. So yeah, I definitely get that in terms of like routine and stuff. They kind of make it part of your life, don't they? They're just everything about them, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, we could. I think we're gonna have to do a bonus episode with just 21 and Sensory podcast guests animal hour or something.
Yeah.
This is my pitch to you.
I love that. I mean, I kind of did that with I don't know if you follow her, Chloe Tier. So she was on the waiting list for a guide dog, and then I had her back on when she got her guide dog, and I was like, tell me everything. And it was honestly fascinating. But yeah, I would love, maybe we'd just do a kind of, I was going to say a dog episode, but I know there are cat people out there.
An animal show, an autistic animal show and tell.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I really like that idea. And then I can post pictures as well to it's a whole
sign
thing.
Me up.
Okay. I might need some guinea pig and corgi photos.
Well, if you ever want any guinea pigs.
Yeah, you're clearly the person to ask. Like, I love that it's like a passion of yours, as well as, you just really enjoy being able to breed them and seeing that history as well. That's so cool. I can't believe you have 20.
At one point I had 130.
What?
Yeah, don't ask.
Wait, I'm shocked at 20. Oh my gosh, how much like food and hay and
yeah, it's a lot. There's a reason I have 20 now.
I see.
That was a lot. It was sensible. It was sensible at the time. I know a lot of people actually. There's like a community, and I know people still with like 100 or something. Wow. So at the time it wasn't insane, but 20 is manageable.
I can imagine they're quite like, are they the sort of animal that need other ones around them, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Like they're a group, like a pack almost.
They are so sociable that they hate being on their own. And in Switzerland, it's illegal to have only one guinea pig.
No.
Fun fact.
They know what they're doing.
They do.
That's so cute. Oh. I'm now just thinking about little guinea pigs.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we would like to mention?
No, I mean, this has been such a lovely chat. Yeah, that's what I can say really, is it's felt really special, just as I knew it would be. So thank you. I feel like we've covered lots.
I think, yeah, considering just over an hour, I feel like we've tried to do a bit of everything. So thank you so much for coming on to my podcast. It's gone really quick as always. I know I always say it. But where can people follow you online? Where can people buy your books online? Feel free to promote the hell out of yourself.
Which is also the bit I hate the most.
You're like, please buy my book.
yeah, that's what I always tell people before I even say hello. It's like, buy my book, and hello, no.
Nice to meet you.
So usually I'm hanging out on the internet. I'm Lucy the Reader everywhere across the internet. So youtube.com/Lucy the Reader, where I make videos on classic books, and basically it's just an outlet for all my bookish special interests. So yeah, I'm Lucy the Reader across all social media, but also we'll link to my link tree, where there'll be links to different retailers and places to, hopefully, if you've liked this episode and found the idea of the book interesting, you might like to go out and read Real When I'm With You. So it's available from most good bookshops, lovely bookshops. So your support means a lot. And I always think as well, I mean, I think it's quite a bold statement, but I always think that supporting a book like this, whether it's mine or any other autistic authors, is also supporting a whole industry of autistic authors, because support for one helps prove to the industry as a whole that our books do sell, that there's an audience for them, which it's I like to think that it encourages new up and coming talent as well. So
absolutely,
supporting me always means a lot, but also supporting all of us. It's important, I think.
Definitely. And also, can I just say how beautiful the cover is? Not that I'm judging a book by cover. I have read the book, it's brilliant. But the cover is beautiful as well. So there's another reason to.
And I can back that up because I had nothing to do with it. I did not. I can't. I'm dyspraxic. Maybe there are some dyspraxic people that can draw, but I'm not one of them. I don't have the coordination. So I can very clearly say it's a beautiful cover. I love it. I'm obsessed with it because I had nothing to do with it.
I feel like it'd make a really nice poster as well. Like, it's just really cute. Yeah, maybe posters, maybe.
Merch coming soon.
Cool. Thank you again. I really appreciate you coming on to chat about your life and your work and the many guinea pigs. So yeah, watch out on Lucy's Instagram potentially for more guinea pig photos.
Exclusive for 21 and Sensory listeners. Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, this is big bucket list moment for me. It really does mean so much, and everything that you do for all of us autistic people means a lot. And having a space like this where we can just be ourselves and feel included and feel like we're not alone, that is, I think, more important than ever. So thank you for everything that you do, because I know it meant a lot to me when I was going through the process of diagnosis, and it means a lot to me now. I can't speak highly enough of everything that you do, so thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you, and that really means a lot.